Broken heart opening emotional hook. Imagine walking into a room smiling, dressed in your best clothes, only for the man you trusted most to humiliate you in front of everyone. That's what happened to 27-year-old Amira in Lagos. But when she picked up the microphone, what she revealed didn't just silence the laughter, it shook the entire party to its core. Amira walked into the brightly lit hall, her golden gown shimmering under the chandeliers. Everyone turned to look at her, and for a brief moment she felt like she belonged. She clutched Taya Okonkwo's arm, her heart beating fast with hope. Tonight was supposed to be special. She had spent hours preparing, dreaming that this would be the night he finally introduced her proudly to his wealthy circle. Every smile she received gave her courage. Every glance from the guests felt like the beginning of a new chapter. As the music played and the laughter of the guests filled the room, Amira stayed close to Tay, waiting for him to acknowledge her. She believed he would hold her hand, look into her eyes, and tell the world she was his future. Instead, his attention was elsewhere, on the drinks, the jokes, and the approval of his friends. She laughed softly, trying to join in, but her heart waited for his gesture of pride. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, as she reached for a small plate of food, Tay's voice cut through the noise. With a smirk curling at the corner of his lips, he said loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "Careful, don't eat too much. You're already looking fat." For a moment time froze. The laughter of the room erupted instantly, sharper than any knife. Glasses clinked, and some even whispered as their eyes darted back to her. Amira's smile faltered, her cheeks burning as though fire had spread across her skin. She tried to laugh it off, but her throat was dry and her eyes stung. She felt the weight of humiliation pressing her down, crushing the excitement she had carried all night. The golden gown that once made her feel like a queen now felt heavy and suffocating. She looked at Tay, searching his face for kindness, for any sign of regret, but all she found was arrogance. He sat back smugly, as if mocking her pain made him more powerful. Amira swallowed her tears, standing tall even as her spirit shook. In that moment, something deep inside her cracked. She realized this night, which she thought would mark her beginning, had turned into a cruel reminder. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who break you in front of the world. Amira stood frozen, the sound of laughter still echoing in her ears like cruel bells. She forced the corners of her lips upward into a shaky smile, praying no one could see how her hands trembled. Her throat ached with the tears she refused to let fall. The golden gown she had been so proud of now felt like a costume, trapping her in a role she never wanted to play, the girl everyone laughed at. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, soft at first but growing sharper, slicing through her like blades. Some guests tried to mask their laughter behind their glasses, others leaned close to their neighbors to share comments they thought she couldn't hear. But she heard every word, and each one pushed her deeper into a darkness she couldn't escape. In that moment, she felt a gentle tug at her hand. Her best friend Ngozi appeared at her side like a shield. With eyes full of fire and compassion, Ngozi whispered urgently, "Don't cry here. Not in front of them." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that Amira still had dignity to protect, even in the middle of her humiliation. Amira lowered her gaze quickly, letting her hair fall across her face like a curtain. She bit the inside of her cheek, fighting back the sobs that clawed at her chest. The room blurred around her, voices turning into muffled noise as if she were drowning underwater. Her body stood still, but inside her heart was screaming louder than ever. Why should I always be silent? Why should my pain be swallowed just to protect his pride? Her mind raced, replaying the moment again and again. The smirk on Tay's face, the laughter of his friends, the sting of being ridiculed like she was nothing. It wasn't just the words. It was the ease with which he threw them, as if her feelings didn't matter at all. Still she stayed there, rooted in place, pretending she was fine, because to cry in front of them would mean giving them victory. And though her heart was shattered, somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered, a spark that whispered she could not remain silent forever. Long before the glittering lights of parties and the admiration of wealthy friends, Amira had stood beside Tay when he had nothing. In those early days, his pockets were empty and his dreams seemed far away, yet she believed in him with all her heart. When he couldn't afford rent, it was Amira who quietly slipped her own money across the table. When he struggled to put food on the table, she pretended she wasn't hungry, pushing her plate toward him, telling him she had already eaten at work, when in truth she had skipped meals just so he wouldn't go without. She remembered the long nights when he would sit by her side, sketching designs for clothes he dreamed of selling someday. His eyes burned with passion, but frustration often weighed on him because he lacked the funds to make it real. Amira looked at those sketches and didn't just see drawings. She saw a future, his future. And without hesitation, she opened her small savings account, the money she had worked tirelessly for, and placed it in his hands. "Start your boutique," she told him. "The world needs to see what you can do." With her sacrifices, Tay's tiny clothing stall slowly grew into a boutique, then another. His name began to spread in Lagos as a young entrepreneur with talent and ambition. But why should she always stay silent? Why should he keep shining on the stage of life, while she hid in the shadows? Her eyes began to burn, not with tears this time but with something stronger. She gripped the edge of the table, her hands trembling, then pushed her chair back. Heads turned slightly at the sound of her heels clicking against the polished floor. She rose slowly, every step feeling like a war drum inside her chest. Tay was too busy laughing with his friends to notice, but the crowd began to quiet down as they realized she wasn't walking toward the exit, she was walking toward the stage. The microphone seemed to grow larger with every step, a symbol of everything she had been denied. A voice, recognition, dignity. Her palms were damp, her knees weak, but something fierce inside her kept pushing her forward. She reached the DJ's booth, her hand hovering above the microphone, her entire body trembling like a storm ready to break. For the first time in years, Amira chose herself. She chose not to bow her head, not to swallow the pain. She chose to stand, to speak, to fight back. And in that charged moment, the entire hall began to sense that something unforgettable was about to happen. Amira's fingers curled tightly around the microphone, her heart beat so loud it seemed to echo through the speakers. At first, her voice cracked, trembling like a leaf in the wind. But the silence in the hall gave her strength. Every eye was fixed on her, every glass lowered, every whisper frozen in the air. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was standing tall in the very spotlight where she had always imagined being. Only this time she wasn't standing behind Tay. She was standing for herself. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she forced the words out, her voice quivering at first. "Since everyone is watching." She paused, swallowing hard, her gaze sweeping over the guests, some already leaning forward, sensing the tension. Then, with a sudden burst of fire in her tone, she continued, "Let me tell you who really funded Tay's empire." A wave of confusion rippled through the crowd, eyes darting between her and Tay. The smile on his face faded instantly, his hand tightening around his glass. Her voice grew steadier now, fueled by years of bottled pain. "While he mocked me for being fat," she said, her words striking the air like a hammer on steel, "I built the very business you all admire him for." The sentence hung in the hall like a thunderclap. Gasps exploded from every corner, sharp, loud, unrestrained. Someone covered their mouth in disbelief, another whispered, "What is she saying?" The laughter that had filled the room minutes ago was gone, replaced by shock that weighed heavy in the air. Tay's body stiffened, his confident posture crumbling. His forehead glistened with sweat as he stared at Amira, speechless. His lips parted as though he wanted to respond, but no sound came out. He looked around the hall, desperate for support, but his friends avoided his eyes, unwilling to defend him. The once proud man, who had basked in admiration and applause, suddenly looked small under the harsh gaze of truth. Amira's hand no longer trembled. She stood tall, her golden gown glowing under the lights, her voice steady and commanding. For years, she had been the shadow behind Tay's success, but tonight, she had ripped away the mask. The empire they all praised, the wealth he flaunted, the respect he claimed, it all had her fingerprints on it. And now, for the first time, the world finally knew. The room stayed frozen, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Amira's voice, once fragile, now carried the weight of years untold. She steadied herself, her gaze sweeping the crowd, catching their wide eyes and stunned faces. You see, she began, her voice calm but sharp. My father, Chief Sese, trusted me with his legacy. He left me a fortune, an inheritance meant to secure my future. Gasps echoed again. People who knew the name Sese understood the power it carried. Heads turned, whispers rushed like wind, but Amira didn't pause. She pressed her hand to her chest, her tone thick with emotion. I could have used that wealth for myself. I could have traveled, built my own business, lived a life of comfort. But I didn't. I gave it all, every last naira, to Tay. She turned, her eyes locking onto her fiancé, who now stood frozen, his lips trembling as if the ground had been pulled from under him. The guests shifted uneasily, the clinking of glasses silenced, the music in the background feeling distant. Amira's words cut through the tension like a blade. That company you all admire? The cars he drives, the designer suits he wears, the empire he brags about, it was built on my sacrifices. While he mocked me tonight, while he treated me like I was nothing, I carried him on my shoulders. Her voice wavered but didn't break. Memories flashed in her eyes. The nights she had signed checks, the meals she had skipped, the dreams she had delayed, all so Tay could rise. When he came to me with nothing but a dream, I believed in him. I poured my heart, my time, my inheritance into his vision. And what did I get in return? Laughter. Humiliation. Gasps and murmurs spread across the room. People now staring at Tay with judgment, some shaking their heads. Amira's story was no longer just hers. It was a revelation that shattered the glittering illusion of success everyone admired. Her voice grew steady again, almost fierce. So before you applaud him, before you call him a self-made man, know this truth. His empire was not his creation. It was mine. Built from my trust, my loyalty, and my silence. But tonight, my silence ends. The hall, which just moments ago had been bursting with laughter and music, now felt like a frozen stage where every eye was glued to Tay. The cheerful glow of the party lights seemed dimmer, as if the room itself was ashamed of what had just been revealed. Guests shifted in their seats, whispers buzzing like restless bees. One voice rose softly above the hush. She's the real backbone. The words carried weight, spreading quickly from mouth to mouth, until they hung heavy in the air. Tay, once the man everyone admired, stood stiff, his face pale under the golden lights. He tried to raise his glass as though nothing had happened, but his hand trembled, the liquid inside rippling. His friends, the ones who always cheered him on, suddenly found their shoes or the floor far more interesting. One by one they lowered their glasses, unable to meet Amira's steady gaze. Their silence was louder than any applause could ever be. People began to murmur, their eyes darting between Amira and Tay. The admiration that had once wrapped around him like a crown was unraveling strand by strand. So all this success wasn't his, someone whispered. It was her money, her sacrifice? The disbelief turned into judgment, and judgment turned into quiet anger. The room that had been Tay's safe haven was now his cage. Amira stood taller, her golden gown shimmering like armor. She could feel the tide turning. For years, she had been the invisible force, the shadow behind his spotlight. But now the crowd saw her, truly saw her for the first time. Every whispered word, every pair of accusing eyes pointed straight at Tay, tearing apart the perfect image he had built on lies. Tay tried to smile, tried to brush it off with a nervous laugh, but no one laughed with him. The charm that once enchanted his audience was gone, replaced by cracks of desperation. He could no longer hide behind his wealth or reputation. The truth had stripped him bare. And in that silence, cold, heavy, and unrelenting, he realized that his empire might have been built on money, but its foundation had always been Amira. Now that foundation had shifted, and the whole world had seen it. Tay's lips parted as if to grab hold of an excuse, his voice shaky, desperate to regain control. Amira, let's talk about this later, he stammered, his words crumbling as quickly as his image. But before he could finish, Amira lifted her hand and her voice rang out, steady and sharp, slicing through the thick silence. No. Tonight you shame me publicly. Tonight the truth will be heard publicly. The entire hall erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and then cheers thundered through the room, filling every corner with energy that Tay could no longer command. For the first time, Amira was not the woman standing quietly behind him, not the shadow in his story. She was the story. She stood tall, golden gown shimmering under the lights, her chin lifted with a courage she never knew she had. Every pair of eyes that had once admired Tay now turned toward her, seeing her not as his fiancée but as her own person, radiant and unshakable. Tay's mouth opened again but no sound came out. His usual charm, the smooth words that always silence critics, failed him. He looked around the room for support, but his friends avoided his gaze, shrinking back as if they didn't know him. The same people who had laughed at his cruel joke now clapped and cheered for Amira. Their loyalty had shifted, their energy stolen from him and placed at her feet. Amira felt a fire rise inside her, the years of silence burning away. Her voice grew stronger with each word, echoing through the hall like a declaration of war against humiliation itself. The more she spoke, the more the crowd applauded, as though each cheer wiped away another scar left on her by his cruelty. For the first time she didn't feel small, didn't feel ashamed. She felt powerful, and the room reflected it back to her. Tay shrank, cornered by the very audience he once commanded. He realized too late that this night, which he thought would make him shine, was the night he lost everything. The crown of admiration had been ripped from his head and placed on Amira's. She, once invisible, now stood at the center, her dignity and strength blazing brighter than any insult could dim. This was no longer his party. It was her moment of triumph. Amira's hands did not tremble this time. Slowly, with deliberate calm, she reached into her golden clutch and pulled out a neatly folded set of documents. The room leaned forward, curiosity thick in the air. She unfolded the papers, her eyes never leaving Tay's pale, sweating face. With a voice steady and clear, she said, "Since everyone here has witnessed the truth of my sacrifices, let me show you the final truth. This," she lifted the pages high so everyone could see, "is proof that I own 70% of Tay's company. By law, by right, and by my father's trust, I hold the power. And starting tonight, I will be taking full control." The room exploded. Gasps cut through the music, followed by whispers racing from one guest to another. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. The clinking of glasses had stopped, the laughter vanished. It was as if the entire hall froze to watch the empire of Tay Okonkwo collapse in real time. Tay's jaw dropped, his lips moving but no sound escaping. His chest heaved as if he were suffocating under the weight of the truth. He stumbled forward, hands outstretched, as if reaching for the papers that would save him. "Amira, no, this is not." But his voice broke, drowned out by the wave of murmurs filling the room. Amira remained unshaken, her posture regal, her words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "For years, I let him wear a crown built on my sacrifice. Tonight I take back what was always mine." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried, echoing into every corner of the hall until no one could deny her power. People who once admired Tay now looked at him with disgust, whispering, "She built it all. And how could he betray her?" The image of the charming, successful entrepreneur shattered, leaving only a man exposed as a fraud. Amira held her head high as the murmurs grew into cheers, her name replacing his in the air. Tay's face collapsed into defeat, the sparkle of confidence gone from his eyes. He had tried to humiliate her in front of everyone, but now, in front of the same audience, she delivered the final blow. This was not just revenge, it was justice, and the whole world had witnessed it. The hall was still buzzing with shock when Amira stepped toward the exit. Every camera in the room followed her, flashing so brightly it was like walking through lightning. But she didn't flinch, not this time. Her chin was lifted, her steps steady, every movement radiating a new kind of power. The same guests who had laughed at her hours ago were now on their feet, chanting her name as though she had always been their queen. For the first time, Amira wasn't walking out as the overlooked wife. She was leaving as the rightful crown of everything they had built. Outside, the night air felt different, free, alive, electric. Ngozi rushed forward, her arms wide, and pulled Amira into an embrace so tight it was as though she was trying to hold up all the years Amira had carried alone. "You did it," Ngozi whispered, tears in her eyes. "You finally showed them who you are." Amira smiled, not with arrogance but with a quiet, unshakable pride. She had waited, endured, and swallowed her pain for too long. Tonight that silence had ended. The crowd spilled out behind her, chanting louder, their voices rising into the sky. Camera crews pushed forward, eager to capture her glow, reporters shouting her name, begging for a statement. But Amira didn't need to say another word. The world had already seen the truth. She wasn't a shadow behind Tay. She wasn't a joke at their dinner tables. She was the force that had carried his empire, the power he underestimated, the crown he thought would never shine. As she stood with Ngozi beside her, the voiceover carried her story beyond the party, beyond the city, beyond the night itself. He mocked her for her weight, but she carried the weight of his success. And when she finally spoke, the world saw her for who she truly was, the woman who turned humiliation into power. The final flash of cameras lit her face like a crown, her smile steady, her presence undeniable. And with that, Amira didn't just leave the party. She left behind the woman they once tried to break, stepping fully into the woman she was always meant to be. The queen of her own story,